Today, I'm going to be training on the California Residential Purchase Agreement. I'll be looking at the screen a bunch because I'm going to be reading off from the screen. So everyone just kind of try to follow along. I was going to print copies for everybody to go here and out of paper, and I guess don't have any more. We have tons at the other office, so I'll have to bring some over. But I did share a Drive document. I emailed everybody to it. So in that Drive document has both a sample RPA completely filled out, and it has an explanation of how I got there. And so that's what I'm going to go through today, is actually going through each thing you choose and an explanation of why you're choosing that and why you might choose something different. So the motivation for doing this is we're going to now give everybody the abilities to now start being able to do their own contracts. So in the past, we've just had them submit on the type form so that Hannah and Jacqueline could do them. So that option is still available for you. So Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. until 10 p.m. you still can submit the type form online, and that type form goes directly to Hannah and Jacqueline, and they'll complete the purchase agreement for you. And on the weekends, as of the moment, it's just you need to text me ahead of time, just give me a warning, and I'm happy to help you with it. So those options are still very much available to you. This is meant to be in addition to that. A lot of times people have like an urgency of, I need to get this in within the next 5 minutes, not the next 2 hours. And so this is really for when you have that urgency to that point. And then also on the weekends, if you'd like, you can just go ahead and fill it out as well. We do have somebody getting trained right now to have a standard time. I think he's going to be between 2 p.m. and 10 p.m. But that's still kind of to be determined. So this is giving everybody the ability to do it. And at the very least, even if you continue to use Jacqueline and Hannah to write your contracts, at least now you'll understand a lot better what you are seeing. And that way, when you get it to you in DocuSign, you can actually review it, make sure everything's correct. And if your client has questions, you'll know how to answer it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and hop into it. So everybody who is signed up with MCAR should have an account with CAR, the California Association of Realtors. And so to get to these zip forms, you go to car.org, and right here, there's this access transactions. You click on that. If you're not already signed in, they'll have you sign in. Once you're signed in, it'll take you to this page, and then you click access now. You'll click access now, and that'll give you access to this page that I'm going to open here separately. So this will give you then basically your zip forms. This is the home screen once you get into the zip forms. And so you can create a new contract by clicking new, and then you can do an existing one by accessing them down here. So I have an existing one that I made for today's training. So I'm going to go ahead and open that one. Okay, so this will be the next page. So you want to fill out this type of information, you can. I typically don't. The two things that I do use often, I'll just talk about this while it's loading, is MLS Connect and Apply Template. So the template is what I mentioned, is that we'll send out a video on how to create your own templates. The templates are great to have because when you go to start a contract, like we literally just apply template, and then there's only a few things left to fill out after you apply to the template. And the same with MLS Connect. So if you click MLS Connect, you put in the MLS number, and then it'll automatically pre-populate the address, the opposing agent, their brokerage, their DRE number. So it'll automatically populate all that stuff in the contract, so you don't have to write it. So you just need the MLS number for that. And then the apply template, you'll create your own template, and then you'll just apply it, and that's how that'll work. Okay, so then to get to your documents, you click on Document. And then here on this right-hand margin, you're going to have at the top, you're going to have a button that says All Forms. This is literally all your forms. And the search function of this works pretty great. So if you just start to put in a word, it'll bring up all the words that have listing in it. Or if you say commercial, it'll bring up all the documents that have commercial in it. I spelled commercial, so there's that. So you have those ones there. So that's how you can get to all these forms. All the forms that typically go in conjunction with the RPA that are typical addendums that you use. There's actually a section where you can select those addendums, and then when you select those addendums through the checkbox, it'll automatically pre-populate that addendum into this little form document area. So it makes it really easy, and I'll show you exactly where you find those. So typically you won't need to go and start like adding all your own addendums. The contract will guide you on exactly what you want to add as you're aware what's going on with your current deal. So there's two different form editors. There's a new one, I guess. I haven't used it personally. I like the Form Editor Classic, so that's what I'm going to train on today. I'm sure the new one is just a different format, just a different layout. So you're welcome to explore those on your own. I have not taken the time to do that. So this is the beginning of the RPA. So the RPA that as Carr has it on the program starts out with a couple of disclosures. So the first disclosure regarding real estate agent relationship and what that means to be both a buyer's agent and a seller's agent, and what it means if you're representing both buyer and seller. So technically, it is already disclosed that you could be representing both the buyer and the seller. So you don't technically have to disclose it in addition. Now, is it good common practice to do it? Yes. Is it more ethical and a better way to work with your clients to be transparent? Yes. But by the letter of the law, you've already disclosed it with this contract here. So as you're filling it out, you want to put a check box next to buyer. There's two buyers. You put two check boxes, and you put the buyer's name here. So I've pre-populated everything already that you typically need to fill out on just a standard offer. And then in the Google Drive folder that I sent you guys, it has it all in there as well. And it has it in blue ink. So when you're doing your offers, I would recommend just having that one open and having like just your two screens open with both the information. And now we can kind of just look back and forth. And so you know if it has blue ink on the one that's already done, that means you're going to need to make an edit on this contract in zip form. All right, for agent, you're always going to want to put Real Brokerage Technologies for the real estate broker firm. And then this is the DRE license for Real Brokerage. Then you'll put in your agent name and your DRE license. And you should know that information. If you don't know it already, you can always look it up on the DRE website by verifying the license.
It should be on your email signature.
Should also be on that. Yeah, you're technically required to have it on all marketing displayed. This is a fair housing discrimination advisory. Do not discriminate based on all of those reasons listed there. And then this information, once you add the buyer's name once, it'll automatically pre-populate to all the fields. So you don't have to keep writing the buyer's name over and over again. Any place where there's going to be a buyer, it's going to automatically do it. And then if you know the seller's name, like if they put it on the MLS, if you did the MLS Connect, it will automatically populate it here. Most agents don't write it because they don't want to give you the property owner's name, even though it's public record. Anyways, it'll pre-populate there. If you don't know it, what you can write is owner of record. So technically, this makes it a legal contract when you write owner of record. Some agents will tell you it doesn't. They're wrong, but just do what they ask so you get the offer accepted. Because ultimately, the way that we're crafting these offers are going to put us in the position to make us the most successful and get our offers accepted. So if an agent tells you, hey, I don't want to say owner of record, change it to what they want. Don't make a fight about it, because all you want is to get your offer accepted.
Question. If you submit an offer with owner of record, they want you to change it. Is it easy just to go back and change it, or you have to redo the whole thing?
Yeah, it's easiest to go. So you'll redo the whole thing, but like you would literally just go in this. And if I just came in here, it's like everything else is filled out. If I just change it to Austin Cooper, it'll change it everywhere that I need. And then I'll just send it back out for DocuSign.
Okay.
And that's typically the best way to do it. There's a couple specific agents that we've done deals with recently that hate owner of record, and they claim that it's not allowed, but it is.
90% of the time, that's something that they can counter out as well.
Yeah, they can do a counter. That's an easy way to do it too, is counter that.
Yeah.
But you're not doing anything by doing that other than just giving the information. Because this purchase agreement is really like a letter of intent. Your actual contract is coming from the title company. So this is a letter of intent and escrow instructions. So the actual contract to purchase the property is going to be the grant, not this contract here. So this is the contract, but it's not what's officially recorded with the county. Okay, possible representation of more than one buyer. This is the second time it discloses it. So it discloses it twice of what you do. So all this information should already be pre-populated. If you did MLS Connect, the brokerage and agent from the other party will be now pre-populated. Just so you're aware, on MLS Connect, it pulls in the DRE number for the brokerage, but it does not pull in the DRE number for the agent. And so it is a DRE violation to not have that information present. So that is something that an agent will complain about. So try not to leave it blank. You can look it up on MLS. It says what their DRE number is, and then, or you can do a DRE search. Almost every agent is going to complain. Any agent who's is a stickler about paperwork is going to complain about that because they know that it's a DRE violation. Wire fraud, electronic advisory is just stating do not wire people money without confirming that that's their bank account. And now we're to the RPA. So the actual RPA is 16 pages, and you can see we're already like, what, 6 pages in before we even get to the meat and potatoes. So the beginning is kind of the fluff, giving those standard disclosures that apply to every transaction. So now that we're into the actual parts that are customized to fit our particular transaction. So you want to always fill in the date that you're preparing this. That's a simple one. Your buyer names will already pre-populate from those earlier fields that you filled out. And then here you'll need to put in your property address. So as you click it, you can put in the address and it'll sometimes start to populate it. If you did the MLS Connect, it'll also already populate all this for you as well. So the MLS Connect is nice for that. And then the big one is to make sure you get the APN correct. So if there's more than one APN, you should put both APNs on here. There's also another field that you can clarify that. And so the APN is truly how they identify the properties, because sometimes the APNs don't match what we think is the address. Like a lot of times, like for example, 872 lane, we all call it 862 lane, but the technical property address is 872 lane because that was the original house. But if you wrote 862 lane and had the correct APN, it would still be correct.
Yeah, there's I've seen the APNs done in 9 numbers and sometimes 12, but it's just 3 zeros. You need to have the 3 zeros.
You don't need to have 3 zeros. Yeah. And then it's just because in other areas, those aren't zeros. Or I think maybe they're giving themselves the option. I don't know. All right, so this agent disclosure. So you have 2 disclosures relating to these. And so you just want to make sure that you're checking the right boxes. So if you are representing both the buyer and seller, make sure you are checking both the buyer and seller. That is the most important part of disclosing dual agency, is having that checked correctly, because it was already disclosed to them earlier in the contract. But this is where you're saying, hey, I'm actually doing this. But typically you're just going to be representing the buyer, and your listing agent is going to be the one information in here. And you just make sure the correct boxes are checked for each person. Anytime you have like a dual list with another brokerage, you would utilize this, and there'd be a separate addendum that would explain it. All right, so now into these forms. So Jacqueline went over about a month ago what these all kind of meant. And so just want to give you guys a little reminder that they label each one of these now A through, I think R is the last one. And then what's really nice is they tell you exactly where the corresponding information is within the contract. So if you or your client has a question about a specific field, you can go to 5C. If you have a question about loan amounts, you can go to 5C1, and there'll be a lot of text. There'll be a wall of text explaining every single little detail of this. And so anytime you have a dispute or something like that, you want to reference back to those actual long pieces explaining what is going on in that part of the contract. So purchase price, you'll put in the amount that you're offering here. If it is cash, you need to select this box here in additional terms. So very important, you do it. When you do select it, it'll automatically remove the ability for you to put in a loan. It'll remove the ability for you to have a loaner or appraisal contingencies and stuff like that. So the form is smart. It knows when you click certain things, it removes those other corresponding items. Close of escrow typically is 30 days, especially in the marketplace that we're in now, where we're in low volume transactions. If we get into a market again where there's a really high level of transactions, it's possible to go higher on the close of escrow because of appraisals become more challenging. So that's usually what slows down loans, is the appraisal portion or getting your loan approved. So as long as we're in these low inventory states, we're going to be at 30 days or less. And if you're getting people pre-underwritten, you can get as low as 21 days. That's what we learned from chat last week. Expiration offer is a huge one. So if you're going into a situation where the property that's priced on the lower end or below what you believe is market value, and you really want to blitz this thing hard and be very, very aggressive, I recommend shortening this. So it defaults to 3 calendar days. It defaults to 3 calendar days. So if you want to be on the more aggressive end, you can say, hey, I require a response by tomorrow at 5 p.m. or something like that. So you can enter that here on expiration of offer. Your initial deposit amount is your EMD. So typically we want this to be 3%. It can be as low as 1% typically, but I do recommend always keeping it at 3% unless the buyer is in a situation where they cannot afford the full 3% at the time of opening escrow. And then this is due within three business days after acceptance by wire transfer or cashier's check. I don't know why the contract doesn't say cashier's check, but wire transfer is the way that it's most commonly given to the title company. If your buyer needs more than 3 days, like so let's say they're in Italy when they're making this offer, make sure you extend this, because if you don't pay the EMD within 3 days, we can cancel the contract on you. Increased deposit is the next one. This is a rare one to use. I see it's most typically used when people are buying a property and they haven't sold their other property yet, so it's going to be contingent upon the sale of that property. So if they're using all the funds from the property they're selling, they might not have a lot of cash in their bank account to be able to pay the full EMD. So they might start out with like a 1% EMD, and then upon all contingencies being removed, they increase it to 3%. So whenever they sell that property, they get that cash released to them, and so they increase that deposit amount at that time. And as we all know, our EMD is really just a placeholder until you remove those contingencies. So it really doesn't matter if it's how much is given at the initial point, as long as you have the increased deposit at 3% upon removal of contingency, because that's when it becomes hard. That's when you risk losing it. Any questions on that one?
Yeah, so for increased deposit, say you do put 1% down, and then you check increased deposit.
Yep.
Do you put 3%, meaning you're going to add an extra 3%, or it's going to go up to 3%?
You put the literal amount you're increasing by.
Okay.
So yeah, you put 1%, then you put 2%, and that would equal total.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. And it doesn't go by percentages; it goes by dollar amounts. So you put in the dollar amount, and then it'll tell you what that percentage is. So just pull out your calculator on your phone. You know, it's easy on this one because it's $1 million, so it's a nice clean number. But if you get like 967,000, you're not going to do that in your head. Just pull out the calculator. All right, loan amount. If you did all cash, it's going to not even allow you to select this box. So when you do this loan amount, do what your buyer thinks they're doing. Now, keep in mind though, this is only escrow instructions. They can change it at any time. Honestly, doesn't really matter what you put here. Some agents will get stickler about it, but you can change your loan amount at any time in escrow and it doesn't affect the purchase. Then these next two boxes are ones that you can utilize. So you can state that the interest rate is not to exceed a certain percentage, and you can also state how many points they can use in order to obtain this. I typically never use this one because if you have a loan contingency in place, that's basically what a loan contingency is you have the ability to fall out due to a loan. I see buyers agents do this every once in a while, and as a listing agent, I personally hate it because they're giving themselves a get out of jail free card. Yeah, that could be exercised 2 days before close of escrow.
So they could that could protect them even after the removed contingencies.
Yes. Yes. So Tiff just had a situation where the buyer went and wrapped up a bunch of money on the credit card the week before they closed escrow, and it affected their loan rate. And then they had to extend the close of escrow by like 2 weeks, I think. And so, yeah, if she had put in there not to exceed, I don't know, like 6.5%, well, her interest rate went up to 6.75 because this person's active credit card debt in that process. Her buyers could have technically canceled at that point. As buyers agents, we do have a fiduciary responsibility to our buyers, but our fiduciary responsibility is more towards helping them act out their original intent, which was to purchase the property, not to give them a back door to be able to cancel if they wanted to buy a bunch of stuff at the grocery department store or furniture store. If they want to buy a car, yeah, that's not acting as a fiduciary responsible party. So I personally, when I see it as a listing agent, I've countered it before, and if I have multiple offers, a lot of times I just won't select that offer because I'm like, oh, this person's already looking for that.
Yeah.
If it is a loan other than a conventional loan, then you want to select what type of loan it is. So the most common are going to be FHA and VA. If you do have seller financing, please just reach out to me. The seller financing addendums are very complicated, and I'll help walk you through them. Those would be good ones to just have Jacqueline complete herself. They're just a lot more complex, and they do need to be correct. So it's just good to get an extra set of eyes looking at them with somebody who's experienced with them. If you are doing an FHA or VA loan, there are lender required repairs. So typically the most common one is Section 1 repairs. So if they have a pest report already on file, let's say they have to get it tented and replace some dry rot. That's all Section 1 repairs. The FHA or VA loan companies are going to require that takes place before you close escrow. So this is stating how long you get that list of how many required, how long those need to be delivered. And that's why FHA and VA loans are typically less strong than conventional in cash is one of the major reasons why. The only other thing I could think of for other would be like hard money loan or private money. If you're doing like a margin loan, I would just call it cash because as far as the seller and listing agent are concerned, it is cash. You could technically put other margin loan. I just think you're getting yourself to be required to provide more disclosures than you really need to. They have that cash in their account. How they're accessing it is none of the seller's business. Additional finance amount. So this is going to be really common for if you do like a jumbo loan. So a lot of times when jumbo loans aren't very advantageous, lenders will switch to a product that's called an 80-10-10. Which means they'll finance 80% of the loan with a conventional loan. They'll finance 10% with a line of credit, and then you can do 10% down. So it's a common way they'll do 10% down on jumbo loans when they're a little bit more strict, or when the jumbo loan market isn't as good as it is right now. And those kind of things just go back and forth. So as it stands today, I'm not seeing very many of them, but within the next 2 weeks, it could just pop up and be a thing again. So just kind of be aware of that. The other common reason why you might have additional finance amount is if they're going to be seller financing on it. So you might get a first with a non-recourse loan, and the seller might take a secondary position with seller financing. So that means they might finance the down payment or part of the down payment for them.
So for the additional financing amount, say you do an 80-10-10.
Yeah.
Is it so you have your loan amount down, and then if you have two of those, how would you do that? Great question.
So let's do an 80-10-10. That's a perfect example. So 800,000, that's our 80%. Yeah. And then our additional finance amount is going to be 100,000.
And then the other 10 is just their own down payment.
Is their own down payment.
Okay. And we don't
now.
Anything.
No, you don't. No, so it defaults. It shows you right there the balance of down payment. It automatically calculates what your balance of down payment is going to be. So that's your down payment minus your E&D.
Got it.
So 100,000 is our down payment here. Our E&D is 30,000. So we have a remaining balance of 70,000, and that's the amount that's going to be due at time of close of escrow plus their closing fees.
Yeah.
And then most closing fees are on the lender side. So if you have buyers like really harping you for what are my fees going to be, redirect them to the lender because for you, your part of it is very minimal for the buyer.
Ours is just our convention.
That's the seller fee.
Oh yeah, so then what is our closing?
They have 50% of escrow fees, and then if you're in Santa Cruz or Santa Clara, it's also 50% of seller's title insurance.
Okay.
And then you got like some dock prep, like $35 dock, like really small stuff.
Title fees aren't too bad, right? I mean, like that's for a big range of closing fees.
It's pretty expensive, yeah.
Then it's the loan origination fees.
The loan is where all your costs on the buyer side are. It's really minimal for the buyer.
Like $1,000 to $1,500.
So $1,500, yeah. And then the seller's title insurance is paid by the seller, unless you're in Santa Cruz or Santa Clara too. Also, on that 80-10-10 situation that I was talking about, if you put $900,000 on your loan account, that's fine. My personal opinion is it's not really that much the seller's business as long as you are underwritten and you have your proper pre-approval from a reputable lender. Maybe if you have like a lender that nobody's ever heard about, maybe that's a good reason to ask questions about it. But if it's a local reputable person, if I get a letter from them saying that person's approved of the amount, I'm taking that as a good piece of information personally as a listing agent. Mm-hmm. Okay, so G1 is where we get into seller credit. So this is like the big one that is used right now to get creative. So Jen used this recently on purchasing Hood. So if you are going to be using a seller buy down, whether you're going to be getting a seller credit to pay down their interest rate, this is where you would put it. So you would check this box, you'd state how much they're going to be giving, then I'll give you your percentage. And then you don't need to say what it's being used for. That's something that your lender will work out with the title company. But this is what you're needing to do on the contract. And then as far as additional finance terms, what did I put here? There wouldn't be much you would use it for. Rare to use. Buyer reserves the right to close escrow with a loan. So that's one I usually use is if I'm buying cash, especially if I'm working with an investor that I know like they would like to buy it with a loan if they can, but it's kind of like up in the air whether or not it's gonna be financeable. I'll put here, buyers are the right to close escrow with a loan, purchase not contingent upon buyer's ability to secure finance. So what you're saying there is, hey, we are still gonna try to get a loan, but if we fail, we're still gonna close cash. Like, as far as you're concerned, cash is in your bank account, so you shouldn't care how I get there. So that's something I'll put very often on, or if like there's multiple offers and you have a cash buyer who wants to get a loan, especially when it's like more relevant, I guess, too, when interest rates are a little bit better.
Lisa wanted to do that.
Lisa wanted to do that, yeah, and that's the way you do it, because that way you're still cash, but you can still do whatever you want with that.
Where are you? I'm sorry.
Additional finance terms.
Oh, okay, so that would just be verbiage that you're adding into that?
Yeah, and when you're adding your own verbiage, speak in layman's terms. Don't try to write like a lawyer. Don't try to be tricky. Like, you're not trying to win something here by being tricky with your contracts. What you want is your person on the opposite side of you to be very clear on what you're requesting, because that way if there's a dispute, because if there is a dispute, you're probably going to lose if you try to make it too complicated.
So in this area, you're saying buyers will try to obtain a loan, if not, we'll close all cash.
Exactly.
Okay.
You give a cash offer.
Yeah, you're saying, because it is a cash offer, you're saying like, hey, we're still gonna try to get a loan, but if we fail, no big deal, everything's the same for you.
Can I ask one?
Yeah,
additional
no,
question?
they're great.
So, above that, so seller credit, so what's the difference? What makes the big difference of saying, okay, I'm gonna sell it, sales price is $970 versus $1 million and the 30,000 back?
Okay, that one is, and this specific offer, they're putting 10% down, right?
Mhm.
So they're putting $9 grand towards it. If you get 30 grand off, it's 10% of 970. If you get a 30 grand credit back,
Mhm.
you only paid 10% of that. So you're only actually paying 3% and you're getting a full 27 grand back in the net, if that makes sense.
It's cash versus loan, so
Okay.
the credit is cash, because it goes towards
Right,
the cash, where if you do a reduction in price, that goes towards your loan.
okay,
So if you're buying with an 80% loan, and you got a $30,000 reduction, then 24,000 of that would be 24,000 less in your loan, which is like $75 less per month. So you don't want that.
right.
You're better off getting a credit, because then that can get applied to closing costs, and it can be cash in your bank, and cash in your account there.
Mhm.
So it's much better, because when you amortize a loan over 30 years, that amount of money is so insignificant.
Yeah, question too about the seller credit portion. From my understanding, typically with seller credit, you can only ask up to like a certain amount, which covers closing costs.
Yep.
Now, but if you're doing a rate buy down, you can do more than that.
So talk to your lender. Every single time you're doing a credit, no matter what it's for, always talk to your lender, because every loan product's different, every situation is different,
Yeah.
every buyer is different, and it's gonna be come down to that specific underwriting situation.
Yeah, and I think apparently too, some, like if the person's already kind of shaky, if they're getting a credit, some underwriters might look at that as they're getting financing from somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
So it really could muddle up their loan.
Yep.
Now, if you're doing the rate buy down, do you check that box up in the top right too? Like seller credit to be applied to closing costs, or
It's all part of it. It all gets worked out. If your lender will work that out.
okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Again, remember, this is like a letter of intent, not a contract.
yeah. Okay, so you don't need to put like for rate buy downs like that,
I mean, you could, but then it's for a rate buy down.
right?
So less flexibility, I
Yeah.
You can't-
Nobody's gonna do that. Like, no one's gonna like harp on that in escrow, because it's gonna hurt their chances of closing the deal. It's not gonna help the deal, it's gonna hurt the deal.
Gotcha. Okay, best to be flexible.
Yeah, it's best to be flexible, exactly. This next one is not something that we're really worried about at this time, but it's something that you guys should just be aware of. Is in the Midwest, there's a huge lawsuit against Realty, well, I guess they're called Anywhere now, Anywhere, Keller Williams, and a couple other brokerages, that they were not just properly disclosing what the buyer's agent commission was. There's a huge class action lawsuit around it. And the expectation is that they're going to lose, that the consumers are going to win. And if they do, then there's going to be a lot of changes coming in the future about the way in which buyer agents get paid their commission. And so there's gonna be a lot more disclosures required here in the future, and there's also possibility that buyers might have to start paying their own commissions. So you don't have to worry about it for this contract class, but just be aware of that affecting the market in general, for agents.
They'll just
What did they say? What did they say?
Huh?
What were they saying?
They're claiming that it was that they were basically that buyers are being misled to believe they're not paying commissions because it's bundling the seller. And so you're like price fix. It's like there's several levels. You're price fixing. You're not disclosing and things like that. So basically,
like the seller's like, why am I paying the other agent pretty much?
Well, it's more the buyer saying, well, I hired Jen to do this, but I didn't get to choose how much I paid Jen.
yes.
The seller decided how much I paid Jen. And I didn't get a chance to negotiate that.
But you ain't paying it.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's bundled.
Yeah.
Right.
Because we're always going to add that to the price of the sale, right? The seller is gonna.
Essentially.
So that's why Redfin now has if you guys notice on Redfin, there is a percentage on there now. And it's because Redfin's just getting ahead of this change in the future. And hopefully it'll just be a disclosure issue that we can just be resolved through disclosures. If not, it's going to make buyer agreements even more important than they used to be, because then you're literally going to be negotiating the rate with that buyer. Because if not, you're going to be negotiating at this point. Guess what? You're going to lose because it's delayed. Okay, so here's where you're going to say verification of cash, down payment, and loan application. Always have your financing information when you're submitting an offer. It's okay if it's not attached to this offer, like when you do the DocuSign, but always have it in there when you're submitting your offer to the listing agent. Your offer is very weak if you don't have it there. It's normal. Richard had a situation this past week where he did a really good job explaining the person. The guy even said something along the lines he was going to use a different agent, and then he ended up calling him Richard stood his ground, used an intelligent answer. The guy called him back an hour later with the information he needed. So good job on that one, Richard. Final verification of condition. This is where you do the verification of property, where you walk through the property. Just leave it at 5 days unless for some reason your buyer is not going to be in town. And if they're going to be not in town, then say 10 days prior to closing escrow, something like that. Assignments, very rare. I would say don't edit this ever. It's rare for us to have an assignment, and even when you do an assignment, the seller still has to accept it. They just typically don't happen around here. Loans, this is where you do want to start editing things. So if you want to be more aggressive with your offer, you can edit your contingency for days for your loan. So if you're fully pre-underwritten, you can reduce this. Or if you're in a situation where the person's only W-2, they don't have other investments, it's going to be quick underwriting, you can reduce this. Definitely talk to your lender first. Same with appraisal. Appraisals are happening right now within 10 days. So I feel comfortable putting 10 days, but I think you should still ask your lender before you put it. If you're going to waive either one of these, you're going to check the box for no loan contingency and check the box for no appraisal contingency. The investigation of property is your physical inspection. So the time that you're going to go get your home inspection, your sewer inspection, your roof inspection, all these different things. 17 days is standard. If you're in a situation with multiple offers, I definitely recommend taking this down to about 10 days. I feel as though you can get accurate information in a timely way within 10 days without really any problem at all.
I need to get done on Saturday, February, so.
Yeah,
We went a few days over and it was.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, is if you have a lot of issues that come up, as long as you're transparent with the listing agent, they'll give you those extra couple days because they know it's better to just give you 2 days as opposed to go and find a new buyer. Informational access. So this is one I kind of get kickback on it sometimes, but I like to put it the same amount of days as the closing, because technically these are the days you want access to property. So your buyer might say, hey, I want to go take measurements 7 days before closing. And technically the listing agent can say no, because you didn't provide yourself informational access to the property for that. Now, that's not a very friendly thing to do, and most people will do that. But if you get agents who are sticklers with paperwork and their seller is not fun to work with,
Right.
they might say no, just so it's gonna make their life easier.
And that wouldn't even hurt the offer because it's not a contingency. There's no cancellation rights.
Yeah, I had it countered recently on one, and I thought it was they're only with permission, and so it was well, obviously they're living there. I'm not going to go walk in the door. But yeah, so someone who's a stickler on paperwork might counter that because that guy was big time. I just like to put it because I feel like it protects you a lot within the process. Review of seller documents. So I like to keep this the same as investigation of property. So know that it's however many days you state, but if they don't deliver it to you on time, then you get 5 days after delivery, no matter what. So if they don't give it to you until if say you put it at 10 days and they give you the seller docs on the 10th day, well, that means you have 15 days. And when you're a listing agent, you know what that applies to is your agent visual inspection disclosure. So if you're a listing agent and you don't do your AVID ahead of time, you run the risk of giving the buyer more time on their contingencies. And that's a real thing. So when you're a listing agent, make sure you do that AVID before you even list it.
That gives them 5 more days of agency, right?
5 more days of contingency, yeah, exactly. So they'll be able to cancel the contract because of something they found in the disclosures, which can mean anything.
Mhm.
They didn't like that you checked the fence was shared, canceled. They don't like that you put marks on floor on the AVID, canceled. Prelim title report, that's the report that comes from the title company. Again, I make that the same as the seller documents and the same as investigation of property. The listing agent opens escrow and the title company provides that usually within a few days. So it really only becomes an issue when you are trying to close properties in like 10 days or less. Honestly, guys, when you have a cash buyer that wants to close really fast, I still like doing like 14 days because any faster than that, it's just it's chaos for everybody. It doesn't really make sense unless for some reason the seller is in like a serious need to get this money. But if they were, they would listen a little bit sooner.
We learned that lesson the hard way, trying to do a 5-day close one time.
Yes, it was a night. It was horrible. And it turned into what? 75-day close.
Yeah.
It turned into 75-day close because it was just too much chaos, and the chaos created more chaos.
Chris wanted a 10-day close.
Yeah.
10 days is fine.
10 days is doable, but it's just still like what's really the difference for that seller between 10 and 14?
Well, she's saying the listing agent.
I know, I'm saying for Chris, like what was really helping that? Nothing. Common interest disclosures, that's not really very applicable. It's gonna be on very specific properties. So just keep it the same as your other ones. And then review of lease or lien properties, same thing. I like to keep the same as your seller documents and your title report. So that's anytime you have solar panels, the most common one. Sometimes people will get lease or lien their like their septic tank or propane or something like that. Solar is by far the most common now. And then sale of property. So if the purchase is contingent upon the sale of another property, you check this box here. That will automatically attach that addendum. And then you'll fill that out. Like this is another one, kind of like seller financing. It gets a little bit complicated. So just reach out to me on your first one. After you've done it probably like twice, you get the point. But there's a couple terms that are just confusing the way they phrase them. And so it's just good to get a little extra help on them. If you did want to waive any of these investigations, you would click this CR attached here. That will bring in a contingency removal attachment addendum that you'll also fill out, restating which ones you're removing. So for example, you would say investigation of property 0, and then you would click this. Well, it won't even take that actually. So you click that, that'll attach it, and then you'll remove your fiscal contingency. All right, time of possession. So it's normal to it to be upon the recording with the county. It's typically what you want. The title company will send you an email. Congratulations, we're on record. That's when you go get the keys and access it. If you already know your seller needs a little bit, if you already know they need till 6 p.m. that day, just put that in your private notes and then check the box for this thing. And so that way people know to check the box and give you a specific time. It's rare, but it's happened before. I don't know, I had it one time where the listing agent was like upset about it, but they didn't disclose it. So it was a problem. If there's going to be a rent back, this is with the seller occupied or vacant units. So if it's under 29 days that they're going to have a rent back, then it's a simple seller in possession addendum. And if it is going to be greater than 30 days, it's a residential lease after sale. So you need to do that separate addendum if you check either one of those boxes. And then if there is a situation where the tenant's going to remain in possession after close of escrow, you would click the TOPA here, and that'll give you a separate addendum, just basically detailing out what that means, where the tenant's going to remain in possession, and how the security deposit will be credited to the buyer, and how things will be prorated and things like that. So like that additional addendum will outline those things. And then I always like to also do the estoppels, because the estoppels is certifying whatever is stated in the lease, because you could have a situation where the tenant goes, or there was a rent increase and you don't know about it, or the tenant claims it's their refrigerator, but you just get into these disputes and where The estoppel basically certifies everything at time of contract.
Tenant claims that they were given a rent reduction because of X, Y, Z.
Exactly, or I used my deposit for this, or they owe me money for this, like that, yeah.
What do you mean, using an estoppel?
So it's called an estoppel, and so basically it's just an additional addendum. It's stating the terms of the lease on an additional addendum, and then everybody signs it. So you're saying like, hey, this is our lease, but this is us saying that everything, like we pulled this information from the lease, and if we sign this, it's basically overrides the information in the lease. So the lease said 3,000, the estoppel says 3,200, everybody signed it, rent's 3,200.
Does the tenant have to sign that too?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Usually when we do them, we have the tenant kind of fill it out,
And then the landlord signs it.
and then the landlord vets it.
And we've had that come up in a situation before too, where we almost had to sue a property management company because they disclosed incorrectly on the estoppel. They signed it, we completed the purchase assuming that information is correct, and then after the fact, we tried to claim it was false. And we said, well, too bad, you signed the estoppel, so now it was correct. And so they had to pay money to the buyers. Seller delivery documents, almost always 7 days is gonna be your go-to unless you're closing in 10. If you're closing in 10 days, you might want to say 3 days or 5 days, just so you can make sure you have enough time to review those documents. You know, you need at least 5. So if you're closing in 10, you have to say 5 here. If you're closing in 12, you have to say 7. But I think 7 is a comfortable number. If you are a listing agent, get your disclosures done before you list. That way this isn't a problem for you.
So if you did have a 10-day close and left that at 7 days, that technically give you another 5 days after that?
Only if they wait until the 7th day to give it to you.
Okay, so if they give it to you before the 7th day, still.
It's whatever day they deliver it to you, that's the day you have to go off of. But you just want to make sure that they're giving it to you to give you enough time to review it.
Yeah, you want it.
Yeah, you want enough time.
Realistically though, too, I don't think that most people hold this to the letter of the law. You don't really experience this very often. There's been plenty of listings that I forgot to do and have it until like the day before close.
Yeah.
And everything contingency for.
But I can name you like 10 agents off memory that like, if you do this wrong, they're going to give you hell for it.
Yeah.
They're going to give you hell for it.
It really is, it's an agent to agent thing.
Yeah. But when you get an easygoing agent whose goal is to close the transaction, no big deal. Compliance here is around installing smoke detectors, and we'll get into that. Time to pay for the HOA documents. That's all. Just keep it standard unless you're getting a really, really tight close. All right, items included. So you want to check box these here. I keep these are the default ones that we keep on our purchase agreement, and we don't change them. The only reason why we change them is if we have a complex property that has a lot of bells and whistles, and there's extra things you want included or excluded. The reason why we don't edit it is because the paragraph 9 states that if that is not present, then it doesn't convey. So if they said washer and dryer included, and there's no washer and dryer, well, you can't sell a property with a washer and dryer that doesn't have one already. So it already does not convey. So you'll get agents who say like, oh, that's wrong, that's checked. Well, technically they're wrong because the way that the paragraph is stated already protects you on that. But it goes back to if a listing agent's making a big deal about something, just do what they want.
But you don't check something like microwave because sometimes they're fixtures, sometimes they can be on the counter. But if it's on the counter and that's checked, that technically means.
Yeah, exactly. And if it's a fix, like if it's the hood, that's legally included in the system tab.
Yeah.
I can see where a buyer would come back with something like this though.
Yeah, we've had it several times where they come back but it clearly states only applies to what is already there. Okay, so now these are the ones that do get changed. Allocation of costs. This is one of the ones that changes the most. Natural hazard zone disclosure, those are your fire, your flood, and those type of risks. Seller almost always pays for this. I recommend ordering it before you list the property anytime you have a listing. And as long as you're using Jacqueline, she's going to order it ahead of time. You can choose your service provider. I just leave it blank. That way they can just order from anybody. JCP and my NHD are the ones I personally see them most often, but I don't really see a big difference between any of them. For Q2 and Q3, there's unique situations that you can utilize in this. Most of them are usually covered by other statements and other addendums. The one that I see most often is city report. City report is technically covered by Q5 because it's about the government reports. But I think it's nice when you know there's a city report to include this to state it. So Monterey, Seaside, Marina, and Pacific Grove all require city reports. So it's just a good extra layer of protection to state that the seller is going to be responsible for doing those. If you're working in those 4 cities, don't make it so the buyer is responsible for obtaining the report. Make the seller still responsible for obtaining it, but just say that the buyer is willing to take over whatever fixes need to be done. So if there's any corrective action, so like if the sewer has to be corrected, say the buyer will take care of correcting it, but the seller needs to furnish the report. And the reason why is because you don't want to close escrow without a city report, because the city could go over there and be like, oh, half this house is illegal, and you got to demo all of it, and you just close escrow. So now your life sucks.
And it takes a lot of time to get the city report in as well.
Yeah.
I think it's a 2-week wait time.
Pacific Grove takes a full 10 business days usually. Lately, they've been quicker because they've had as many transactions, but during the last 3 years, they were typically taking full 10 business days.
Seaside doesn't do a city report, or no, they do sewer lateral.
Yes, Seaside doesn't do sewer
But
lateral.
Carmel doesn't do city report,
Correct, but Carmel does sewer.
but Carmel does sewer.
Yeah, so you're always protected by this on Q5. So as long as it says sellers responsible for the inspections reports, technically you don't have to put this. I just like to be redundant so we're really clear. It's very, very clear if you're redundant. Smoke CO detectors and water heater bracing, these are required for loans. So if you're purchasing with a conventional loan, it's typically best to just put seller on this particular one because the listing agent's the one that gets notified of an appraisal. So you as a buyer's agent might not even know the appraisal is taking place, and there might be missing smoke detectors. They might go and do it, and they might find out there's no smoke detectors, so they have to come back, and then the whole thing's extended all over a little $40 piece that had to be installed in property. So it's safe to just put seller. If you're buying cash, who cares? Because these don't really matter. Government required point of sale, that's gonna be the inspection reports. So anytime there's a sewer or city report required. Santa Cruz also has a lot of the water requirements that we have in Monterey. So like they had the 1.28 gallons in the city of Santa Cruz, city of Taos, city of Capitola, things like that. It's always good to have seller to be responsible for providing those reports. And then the next one is who's required for the corrective actions. So that's where I feel most comfortable stating buyer can handle those. Because if you know what you're responsible for, then you can take responsibility for it. The problem is when you say have buyer responsible for reports, then you're kind of signing a blank check because you don't know what you're responsible for yet.
And keep in mind, if you are to say that your buyer is going to handle, let's say, the toilet repair, and you still have physical contingency in place, and your buyer changes their mind, the physical contingency protects you.
Yeah, so you're still, as long as you have a physical contingency, all of that's still negotiable. So you find out, oh, sewer line needs to be replaced and the city's requiring it. Well, it says buyer is responsible, but I have a physical contingency. So that means I can still negotiate. And I can negotiate any new material information that was provided during this contingency period. So you're protected as a buyer as long as you still have that inspection period, as Kevin said. In Monterey County, Santa Clara County, and Santa Cruz County, it's standard to be split 50-50 on escrow fees. I like to put seller's choice always for escrow holder. A lot of listing agents will say who it's already open with, which title company escrow is open with. If they do, you can put it here. You don't need to though.
You put the name or the like holder public?
You're supposed to put like ORTC dash, hell yeah. You're supposed to do like that. But yeah, it's really loose though too. Like you could just put over public. The only time I really see buyers like really needing to choose their own escrow holders, like if they're in a 1031 exchange, some of them don't want to have to use multiple title companies because there's transfer funds. The intermediary handles that for them, so they shouldn't care. But you know, you just get these people who are stuck in their ways. They think they know everything.
A lot of time, the old Monterey Italians will specifically only want to use the one person that's in.
Yeah, so a lot of people only want to, like, yes, that's Fran's the most common person you'll get. Fran and Jerry, because those two work with all the Monterey Italians. So they only want to use those two people. And then your your owner's title insurance. So this is the one that's different for Monterey County versus Santa Clara and Santa Cruz. So Santa Cruz and Santa Clara, it's customary to split it 50-50, and in Monterey, it's customary for the seller to do it. And so you can technically put each to pay their own. People are interpreting that as 50-50. I personally don't think that's a very good way of stating it. I like both. 50 a lot better personally. So if you're in Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, Richard and Diego, you got, and Shanghai too, you guys would do both 50-50 there. County transfer tax, typically paid by a seller, it's 0.1% of the purchase price. So we're talking hundreds of dollars, not thousands normally. I'm not aware of a local city with a transfer tax, but I know there are some in California. So I was advised by MCAR to always put who's responsible for it, even if you don't think there is one, because that way is if you're in a city and you don't know, it covers you. I've had listing agents complain about it before though. I would still put it and just, if somebody complains, you can take it off kind of thing.
They don't have it here on the peninsula.
They don't have a peninsula. I'm not aware of a locals in either of the 3 counties that we currently.
So you could just take that X off and leave it blank, is that what you're saying?
So I've had listing agents before say like, there's no city transfer tax, you check that box. I'm saying, and I say that this is in case, this is in any situation.
Right.
Because if there's no tax, who cares who the seller or buyer's paying it, right? So.
I'll pay 100% $0.
Yeah, I'm technically correct, but it goes back to the, do you really want to, like, is this the bone you want to pick?
Right.
Pick your battles. HOA standard on HOA fees that they do the sell, they already pre-populate seller and buyer. HOA transfer fees typically paid by the seller. If you want to make your offer more aggressive, you can have it paid by the buyer. I personally prefer to put that money in the purchase price though, because most sellers are very conscious and stick to just their top line, and they don't really take the time to calculate their bottom line. So it doesn't make much difference in your property taxes or your loan. I personally like to just increase my price if that's something I would include.
It's actually really smart. You can just put another $500 on it. Like, oh yeah, we're paying for it, but we just want to have the loan paid for it.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I've never used Q16 and Q17, so I'm not quite sure what you would do for it. But if someone thinks of something, definitely share it with me. Home warranty is a big one that we've discussed before. So I personally always love to waive the home warranty and then discuss home warranty when you're already in contract. So if you do it when you're already in contract, because your buyer can purchase the home warranty at any time of the life, at the time they own the property. So what happens a lot is if you bring it up before, you might end up paying for it. So if you want to pay for it for your buyer, that's great. You can say that, you can state that. Or if you want the seller to do it, I don't really like having sellers pay for them. As a listing agent, it kind of like is one of my ticks, is one of the things that kind of annoys me. It's like a $500 to $700 cost, and you're like, hey, why is my seller responsible for this? Like, they don't have any interest in paying this. So for me personally, I think waiving makes the most sense. But if it's something you want to talk to your buyer about before offering, you can select buyer, or you can select that you're going to pay for it. But remember, your buyer can purchase it at any time in their life. All right, so this is the last addendums that you might use. So I'm just going to roll through and just explain to you very quickly why you might use one of these. They're more one-offs, but it's good for you to be aware of what these one-offs are. And then if you check any of these boxes, it'll automatically populate in your document section. So tenant occupied property addendum, we talked about that one earlier. If there is a tenant living at the property, this is going to state whether or not they need to move out, and if they are going to stay, how things will be prorated. Probate purchase agreement is if in the notes, MLS section of the notes, it says if this is a probate sale, you have to have this addendum. And most listing agents are going to be good about once you make the offer, if you don't have it in there, they're going to kick it back and be like, hey, you're missing this. But it should say it in their remarks. And it just goes back to like, don't be sloppy. Don't show a listing agent that you're going to be a sloppy agent. Like, have your addendums in a row ahead of time, follow their instructions. And that way they know you're going to be a good agent while you're in escrow. If you're doing a mobile home, you're going to need that manufactured home purchase addendum. Tenancy in common and stock cooperative are less common. You get that with these like, what are those vacation rental guys called? Casso. That's when you might use these. That's the only situation I can think of. Like maybe I just don't know. Timeshare, yeah. Just really rare. So it won't really come up for most of us. Mixed use is anytime you have commercial and residential units at the property. So as opposed to using commercial or residential, they have you just use a residential and then you put in the mixed use addendum. Other addendum is you might have an addendum number. So like you have a lot of like things you're adding your own terminology to. You might do an addendum and do those things. I definitely do not recommend doing that though, unless it's absolutely necessary. Kevin and I had a recent arbitration where they basically said, say less in your contracts, go by the letter of the law of the contract, because anything you modify, you're opening yourself up to exposure. And so you're actually weakening your offer by doing those type of things, and you're weakening your stance in the dispute. So try not to have a bunch of special requests and special addendums. If the property's already in escrow and you're gonna have a backup offer, meaning you're in like position 1 or 2 to get it if that person falls out, you'd use a backup offer addendum. Okay, this next one's super important. If the property has a septic, a well, or a propane, you need to have this addendum. It's super important that you have it because it clearly states who's responsible for clearing them, filling them, inspecting them, and all these type of things. They're not covered under this traditional contract. If it's not stated, then it's going to be assumed to be a buyer, and then it's going to be like an inspection report, the same as a home inspection would be. So if you don't do this addendum and don't say seller is responsible for clearing the septic and inspecting it, then that means your buyer's paying to have that septic cleared if they want to make sure it's good to go.
I'll give you a specific example. We did one of these down in Quail Lodge. We were the listing agent. The buyer's agent didn't put one on. He said, hey, after the fact, hey, by the way, when are you going to clear out the septic so we can inspect it? I said, oh, the reason we accepted your offer is because you said you were going to pay for it. Dude had to pay, I think like $1,200 out of pocket for his clients to get our people's food sucked out so they can inspect it. So
yeah, so it's roughly $1,200 to do this, and that's like for a good septic system. It could be worse if the septic's in bad shape.
No, so let me get this straight. So if you're a buyer, you want to select that, meaning that they're going to inspect it?
Yeah, so it'll give you a separate addendum, and in that separate addendum, you state who's responsible for each thing.
just because with the septic inspection, it's more than just inspecting it. It literally has to be cleared. And that's just general maintenance. So you want them to clear.
Because there's food, you can't inspect it if it's full.
Okay, so on saddle, I probably should have had that checked if I wanted them to inspect it.
Yeah.
Well,
But the thing is,
they had expected a year ago.
yeah, so there's usually, so like if somebody's a good owner, that means they're usually having it inspected and cleared out regularly every 1 to 2 years. So if you call PTSD or Dewey's, whoever's been the person who's been servicing it, you call them up, they'll have a history and they'll email it to you. Typically you're okay, but like on Kevin's example on that like place one, we had a really bad owner who wasn't responsible and he bought it from somebody who's even worse than him. So that thing hadn't been inspected in like 10 years. And nobody was living there for a long time, so it wasn't very full and stuff like that. So it does matter who you're buying it from, like that will matter. So you never know.
Well, it matters to as far as getting those in place in advance so that when you have a buyer, they can't back out of the deal because something, one of these systems isn't operating properly.
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's what you're trying to avoid as a listing agent, is any opportunity for renegotiation. The contract already states sale is as is. So if somebody wants to put like, if somebody counters you like sale is as is, the contract already states that. Contract already states that. You're being redundant, stated again. But when you find out new material information about the property, then you have the opportunity to renegotiate based on that new information being introduced. If you're going to have an exchange, 1031 exchange, it's good to have the intent to exchange on either buyer or seller side. It's not 100% required, but it's good to have it because it clearly spells things out for you. And then if it's probate, you might have a court confirmation required. And then short sales, the way the market's been increasing the last 6 years, there's no way we have a short sale anytime soon, but it is possible to come back. And those are the primary addendums you use. Now, the remainder of this contract is all the explanation of that grid. So when a dispute comes up, or if you want more information on it, you can read through those. But as for this training, we were just learning how to fill out the contracts. That's all you need to know.